Picture this, a CNN panel discussion, bright lights, important people, and two women about to have a moment that would break the internet. On one side sits Karoline Leavitt, a former Trump press aide turned Republican spokesperson, confident, aggressive, ready to attack. On the other side sits Jasmine Crockett, a Democratic congresswoman known for not backing down from fights. What happened next? Well, let me tell you a story about what happens when someone picks the wrong person to mess with. The panel was supposed to discuss serious stuff: congressional oversight, executive accountability, how different branches of government should work together. For the first 30 minutes, everything was normal. People shared their views. The moderator kept things moving. Just another political discussion. But then, things got personal. The conversation turned to congressional investigations. Were they legitimate oversight or just partisan attacks? That's when Karoline Leavitt decided to go after Jasmine Crockett. Not her policies, not her arguments, her personally. Leavitt looked directly at Crockett and said something like this: "Look, I think we need to be honest about what's happening here. Representative Crockett sits here talking about constitutional principles and oversight authority, but she's been a leading voice in investigations that are clearly designed to damage political opponents. She talks about accountability, but what she's really doing is weaponizing congressional power for partisan gain. And I find it remarkable that someone who's been so willing to abuse congressional authority for political purposes now wants to lecture us about constitutional norms. That's not principle, that's hypocrisy, and I think the American people see through it." Boom. Leavitt sat back with a satisfied smile. She thought she'd landed a killer blow, thought she'd put Crockett on the defensive, thought she'd won. She had no idea what was about to happen. The moderator started to interrupt, maybe to ask Crockett to respond, but Crockett raised her hand slightly. A signal. I got this. When Crockett spoke, her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like a surgeon about to perform an operation. "Karoline, I appreciate you making this personal," Crockett began, "because it gives me an opportunity to address not just your specific accusations, but the broader question of who's actually been consistent on principles of governmental accountability and who's taken whatever position served partisan convenience in the moment." Leavitt tried to interrupt, but the moderator stopped her. "You let Miss Leavitt finish her attack," the moderator said. "Miss Crockett deserves the same courtesy." And that's when Jasmine Crockett absolutely destroyed Karoline Leavitt on live television. Crockett pulled out her tablet. That's right, she came prepared. "When you worked in the Trump White House," Crockett explained, "your job was defending the administration against oversight. When Congress issued subpoenas for information, you were part of the operation that resisted those subpoenas. When witnesses defied congressional demands for testimony, you defended that defiance. When the administration claimed executive privilege over virtually any information Congress requested, you supported those claims publicly." Leavitt's face started to change. She was beginning to realize something bad was coming. Crockett continued, holding up her tablet so everyone could see. "I have statements you made during that period. You characterized congressional oversight as partisan harassment. You described subpoenas as politically motivated. You argued that the administration had no obligation to comply with what you called fishing expeditions and witch hunts. You consistently took the position that congressional investigations of the Trump administration were illegitimate exercises of power that should be resisted." The other panelists leaned forward. They could sense something big was happening. But Crockett wasn't done, not even close. "But here's what's interesting, Karoline. I also looked at your positions before you joined the Trump administration, when you were commenting on politics as a private citizen, and I found something fascinating." She swiped on her tablet, showing more evidence. "You supported congressional oversight of the Obama administration. You praised congressional investigations into Benghazi, into the IRS, into various Obama-era controversies. You argued that Congress had every right to demand information, and that administration resistance to oversight was suspicious and potentially evidence of wrongdoing." Wait, let that sink in for a second. Karoline Leavitt supported congressional investigations when they targeted Democrats, but opposed the exact same kind of investigations when they targeted Republicans. Crockett displayed the evidence on her tablet, showing it to the cameras. "Here are social media posts and statements from 2014 and 2015 where you supported aggressive congressional oversight of a Democratic administration. And here are statements from 2019 and 2020 where you opposed congressional oversight of a Republican administration. Your position on whether congressional oversight is legitimate reversed completely based on which party was being investigated." The panel sat in stunned silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Crockett had just proven, with receipts,
that Karoline Leavitt was a complete hypocrite, that everything Leavitt accused others of, she herself was guilty of. But Jasmine Crockett still wasn't finished. "Now, Karoline," Crockett said, her voice steady and powerful, "I want to address your specific accusation that I've weaponized congressional power for partisan purposes. So let's examine what investigations I've been involved in and what they've uncovered, and let's compare that to what you defended while working for the Trump administration." She began listing investigations, one by one, methodically, like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Documents showing policy decisions that contradicted laws, testimony revealing that officials hadn't followed proper procedures, evidence of conduct that raised serious questions about whether laws were being faithfully executed. For each example, she explained what legislative purpose the investigation served, what potential laws were being considered based on the findings. Then came the knockout punch. "Now, let's talk about what you defended, Karoline." Crockett's voice was calm, but deadly. "You defended an administration that defied congressional subpoenas systematically. You defended a president who ordered officials not to testify to Congress. You defended claims of executive privilege over documents that had nothing to do with legitimate confidentiality concerns and everything to do with hiding evidence of potential wrongdoing." She kept going. "You defended an administration that tried to withhold congressionally appropriated aid to Ukraine to pressure that government to announce investigations of political opponents. You defended officials who lied to Congress about contacts with foreign governments. You defended a systematic pattern of obstruction of congressional oversight that went far beyond anything in American history." The room was completely silent. Everyone watching knew they were witnessing something rare, something devastating. Crockett delivered her final blow.
"So, when you accuse me of weaponizing congressional power, you're accusing me of conducting legitimate investigations that revealed genuine problems and that inform potential legislative responses. But what you defended was actual weaponization, using executive power to obstruct congressional oversight, to hide evidence of wrongdoing, to punish officials who cooperated with Congress, and to treat the legislative branch's constitutional authority as an inconvenience that could be ignored when it was politically convenient." She paused, looked directly at Karoline Leavitt. "That's not hypocrisy on my part, Karoline. That's hypocrisy on yours. You supported congressional oversight when it investigated Democrats. You opposed congressional oversight when it investigated Republicans. You defended obstruction of legitimate congressional authority when it served the administration you worked for. And now you have the audacity to accuse others of weaponizing power for partisan purposes when your entire career has been defined by taking whatever position served partisan advantage, regardless of principle." Complete silence. The other conservative panelists looked uncomfortable. They knew Leavitt had been destroyed, and that defending her would mean defending positions that had just been proven contradictory. The progressive panelists watched with satisfaction, but also with respect, because what they just witnessed wasn't just a political attack, it was a masterclass in preparation and execution. Crocket wasn't done delivering her message. So here's what I want viewers to understand. When someone attacks your integrity and accuses you of hypocrisy, the appropriate response is to examine that person's own record to see whether their accusations are grounded in principle or on projection. She held up her tablet one more time. "In this case, I've shown that Karoline's accusations of others' partisanship and hypocrisy are pure projection. She's accusing me of exactly what her own record shows she's guilty of. I've maintained consistent positions on congressional oversight authority regardless of which party was being investigated. My record shows I've supported legitimate oversight of both Republican and Democratic administrations when I believed investigations were constitutionally grounded and served legislative purposes." The final strike. But Karoline's record shows complete reversal, supporting oversight of Democrats, opposing oversight of Republicans, defending obstruction of legitimate congressional authority when it served the administration she worked for. So when she questions my fitness to discuss constitutional principles, I'll note that my record demonstrates actual commitment to those principles, while hers demonstrates willingness to abandon principles whenever they become inconvenient. And I'll leave it to viewers to decide whose credibility has been established and whose has been destroyed by this exchange. Mic drop. The moderator turned to Karoline Leavitt, giving her a chance to respond. And Leavitt's response? Weak, defensive, pathetic compared to what had just happened. She tried to argue that situations had been different, that Trump-era investigations were illegitimate while Obama-era investigations were justified. But she couldn't explain why. She couldn't articulate any neutral principle that distinguished legitimate from illegitimate investigations beyond which party was being investigated. She tried to claim Crocket had taken her statements out of context. The moderator pressed her. What context would justify the apparent contradictions? Leavitt had no answer. She fell back on a desperate claim. Everyone knows Democratic investigations were partisan, while Republican investigations were serious. But that only proved Crockett's point.
Leavitt's positions were based entirely on partisan convenience, not principle. For the rest of the panel discussion, everything changed. Other panelists kept referencing the exchange. Several noted how important it was to examine whether positions on institutional authority were principled or opportunistic. And Karoline Leavitt? Her subsequent contributions were largely ignored, dismissed. Her credibility had been so thoroughly damaged that other panelists no longer treated her arguments as worthy of serious engagement. Within hours, clips of the exchange went viral. Millions of views, millions of shares. Political commentators across the spectrum, left, right, and center, acknowledged that Crocket had delivered one of the most comprehensive exposures of political hypocrisy they'd ever witnessed. Fact-checkers confirmed that everything Crocket said was accurate. Leavitt had indeed supported congressional oversight of Obama while opposing oversight of Trump. She had defended obstruction of congressional subpoenas. She had taken contradictory positions that couldn't be reconciled with any consistent principle. For Karoline Leavitt personally, this was a career-damaging disaster. She tried to attack Crockett's credibility. Instead, she'd given Crocket the perfect opportunity to document that Leavitt's own positions lacked any principle foundation. The comprehensiveness of the exposure meant that every time Leavitt tried to make arguments about governmental accountability in the future, people would remember this moment. The taint of her documented opportunism would follow her. Even conservative commentators and Republican strategists were frustrated with Leavitt. Several acknowledged privately that attacking Crocket had proven repeatedly to be risky because she consistently came prepared with comprehensive documentation. Leavitt should have known better. For Jasmine Crockett, this was another demonstration of her core approach. Let opponents attack first, then use their attacks as opportunities to expose their own vulnerabilities through systematic presentation of documented contradictions. In interviews after the panel, Crockett explained her preparation. "I anticipated that Leavitt might make personal attacks given her role as a partisan spokesperson," she said. "So I researched her record on oversight issues across different administrations. Once I found the pattern of complete reversal, I prepared documentation. I knew that if she attacked my integrity or consistency, I would have the receipts to prove that projection was occurring." She emphasized an important point. The key to effective counters is comprehensive documentation that prevents the attacker from claiming context or circumstances justified their contradictions. Showing someone had taken exactly opposite positions on the same issues depending purely on partisan considerations is more powerful than any verbal argument about hypocrisy could be, because the documentation makes the opportunism undeniable. So what's the lesson here? It's simple. Don't attack someone unless you're absolutely sure they don't have receipts on you. Karoline Leavitt thought she could score easy points by questioning Jasmine Crockett's credibility. She thought she could accuse Crocket of partisan hypocrisy and get away with it. But she never stopped to consider that maybe, just maybe, Crocket had done her homework. That maybe Crocket had documented every contradictory position Leavitt had ever taken. That maybe Crocket was waiting for exactly this kind of attack so she could turn it around and destroy the attacker's credibility completely. The CNN panel where Karoline Leavitt attacked Jasmine Crockett, only to have the entire panel left speechless, wasn't just a satisfying reversal. It was a demonstration that credibility on questions of institutional authority and governmental accountability requires actual consistency, not just taking whatever positions serve partisan advantage in the moment. And when someone with documented consistency encounters someone with documented opportunism, the result is often complete exposure, the kind that ends the opportunist's ability to make credibility-based attacks on others. If you've ever been attacked by someone who turned out to be guilty of exactly what they accused you of, this story is for you. If you've ever wanted to see someone's hypocrisy exposed with surgical precision, this story is for you. If you believe that principles matter more than partisan convenience, this story is definitely for you. Because at the end of the day, Jasmine Crockett didn't just defend herself against an attack. She proved something far more important, that consistency beats opportunism every single time, that preparation beats confidence, that receipts beat rhetoric, and that sometimes the best response to an attack isn't to defend yourself, it's to prove that everything your attacker accused you of actually applies to them. Karoline Leavitt learned that lesson the hard way, on live television, in front of millions of people, and she'll never live it down. Thank you for watching this breakdown of one of the most devastating political takedowns in recent memory. If this story inspired you, if it reminded you that truth and consistency matter, or if you just enjoyed watching someone get exactly what they deserved after making a reckless attack, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see it. Remember, in a world full of hypocrites, be the person with receipts. Until next time, stay principled, stay prepared, and never underestimate your opponent.